In this video, I'll be discussing fishing floats and situations to use each one. The floats you see here today were all purchased from Walmart. They're very inexpensive. Most of them come in 2 or 3 packs at about a couple dollars each pack. So if you lose a float, it's not going to break the bank. Now let's do a quick inventory of the floats we have. First is a slip bobber that is cigar shaped. Next we have a snap-on weighted cigar float, following a cigar shaped peg float and a smaller cigar shaped peg float. Finally, we have a pear shaped spring stick float. First up is the cigar shaped slip bobber. Here I have rigged up with a bobber stop along with the slip bobber and a jig on the bottom. You can use a jig, a split shot, hook, it doesn't really matter. I also have it tied on with a loop knot. If you're not familiar with a loop knot, I suggest checking out my video on how to make one. They're very effective with jigging, and I also put a link on top of the screen so you can check that out. Over here I have a set of bobber stops. I purchased these from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below so you can check these out. So why would you want to use a slip bobber? Well, let's say you have water that's really deep, let's say 10 feet, and you want to cast out to that depth. Well, you can't realistically have 10 feet of line hanging off your rod. With this setup, you're able to cast just this amount here off your rod, and when you cast it out, your weight will sink down to the bottom at a predetermined depth of where your bobber stop is located. So it will pull the line until it hits the float, and then it will stand up. On a side note, if you have a very light weight on the bottom, it may not be enough to stand this float up. So what I have done is pushed this styrofoam piece up towards the top. That gives the weight more leverage right here, enabling the float to stand up. Next is a snap-on weighted cigar float. We have our snaps up top and the bottom, as well as the weight. This makes for quick adjustments and easy on and off installation. I will show you how to do that in a moment. First, let's talk about why you want to use this float. Let's say you have a very small jig or a small weight and a hook, and you can't get the distance because there's not enough weight to load up the rod. Adding this float with this weight on it will give you enough weight in total to load up the rod and give you the distance that you're seeking for. Let me show you how easy it is to remove and install this float. Press down on the top. That releases the hook or extends the hook, and you can take your line off. That same goes for the top. Just press down on it, your line comes off. Now to put it back on, you just push down on the top, you want that hook to go inside that hole. And then for the bottom, it's the same thing. Like so. Next, we have our cigar-shaped peg float. This peg float has a wedge up top because the line is actually going through the float. The float is actually hollow inside. This allows for a quick adjustments. You just pull off your wedge and you make your adjustments, and you put the wedge back in. Now the downside to this float is that if you want to take it off, or if you want to put one on, you will have to cut your line. I personally don't use this float. I actually take the body and I will transfer it over to the straw on the slip bobber, because the float that comes with the slip bobber is quite large, and when I'm fishing for like bluegill, I don't want too much resistance for the fish to pull the float down, because if they have too much resistance, they could spit the hook out. So transferring this smaller cigar shape to the bobber straw itself makes it easier for the fish to pull down. Next, we have our smaller peg float. It has the same principles as the last float. You have your body and your wedge. This particular float has a 1.5 inch body. It's hollow inside and the line passes through. I primarily use this float for crappie fishing because it's so small and I'm able to skip across the surface of the water when I'm crappie fishing. If you don't know how to crappie fish, I have a separate video on how to do that. I'll put the link in the description below and I'll also put it on top of the screen here. To make adjustments, you remove the wedge, and you slide your float to where you want it, and you put the wedge back in. Finally, we have our pear-shaped spring stick float. Here we have the stick, and then the float itself, in this case it's pear-shaped, along with the spring. The spring allows for easy installation and removal and quick adjustments. Now with the stick style float, the stick allows for a quick upright position following your cast. To adjust the float, you simply pull back on the spring and adjust the float up or down according to the depth that you want. I find that since this is an inexpensive float, I have to wrap the line around at least 2 times in order for it not to slip on the line. If you found this video useful, please hit the like and subscribe button. This is a brand new channel and I do need all the support I can get.